Hey class, this is just a brief practice on some of the translation problems. I just want to walk you through how I go about translating. And so we're just going to do just a couple of problems from 1.3 and 1.4. First of all, these should be, this video is intended to be watched after you've already tried the exercises on your own. That's what you'll get to be the most helpful, I think. But if you're really stuck on the exercises and you want to watch me do a few first, that's fine as well. And so, but don't watch this video until you've at least tried the problems we're talking about on our own. So I'm going to start with one that's in the back and just talk it through. This is 1.1, number 3. On page 27, the problem says, the bill will either be vetoed or else it will be passed, or else it will pass neither the House nor the Senate. So they also tell you what letters you should be using, and it's always good to kind of articulate what each one would stand for. So we use a V, an H, and an S. So first of all, V doesn't just stand for veto. Remember, these must stand for complete sentences, specifically atomic statements. And so V would then stand for the bill will be vetoed. Then H would be the bill will pass the House. Notice I didn't say will not pass the House, because if I add the word not, then it's no longer an atomic statement. And so we have to say that H then represents will pass the House. Sorry, the bill will pass the House. And then similarly, S is that the bill will pass the Senate. So, first I tend to look for the main operator, and the fact that it starts with an either tells me it's probably an or. And so I'm going to then kind of go in order. The bill will either be vetoed, or else it will pass neither the House nor the Senate. So there's the House, there's the Senate, but notice it says neither. Neither is one of those ones you should probably keep on your cheat sheet, but there's two logically equivalent ways to write neither. What does neither really mean? It means not one and not the other. And so if you did it that way, it's fine. However, the other thing you could say with neither is you could say not one or the other. Either of these is fine for neither, and there's both of those would be an acceptable answer on the exam, so that's the answer to premise 3. Having said that, and one of the reasons I encouraged you last video to go back and translate from symbols to English, the last thing I like to do is read what I've written here and make sure it says the same thing logically, not necessarily linguistically, as the original problem. So if I did it that way, oh, this was supposed to be V, wasn't it? Not B. Apologize. Remember, though, don't actually use V on your homework problems, since we're using that for a wedge. So the bill will be vetoed, or it is the case that the House will not pass it and the Senate will not pass it. Linguistically, that's not identical, but we could see that it means the same thing. So my last step when I translate is to just go back to the original by going from symbols to English. Yeah, again, I know the back of the book has the V, but we're trying really hard not to use V, since we're going to have to type in the Blackboard discussion boards, and we'll just use the V for the wedge. All right, let's do one that is not in the back of the textbook. Number 12 is kind of fun. Notice that it has a whole bunch of statements. And that's really important because that tells you this is a very compound statement, and it's therefore worth articulating what each letter stands for. So I'm going to read the whole problem. While the numbers 9, 21, and 45 are all odd, none of them are primes. So n would then be the number 9 is odd. T would be 21 is odd. F is going to be 45 is odd. Now you say, wait a minute, why do we have 3 more letters? We have I, W, and O. Well, look at the rest of the statement. None of them are primes. Well, none of what? 9, 21, and 45. And so presumably I is supposed to represent 9. They just use the first letter and then the second letter. 9 is prime. 21 is prime. Oops, that's a W. My bad. See, they take the second letter. 21 is prime. And 45 is prime. The thing to notice about this is you might say, wait a minute, these all say none of them are prime. But none is a negation, and capital letters must stand for an atomic simple statement. So if we say 9, 21, and 45 are all odd, let's start there. It's the same as saying 9 is odd and 21 is odd and 45 is odd. Now, we can't have this. This is not well formed because it's not clear what order you compute it in. However, if you remember, one of the things Gustafsson and Ulrich mentioned in the chapter is that conjunctions and disjunctions are associative. That is, there's no principal difference between N and T and F, or N and T and F. So these two are logically equivalent, and so it's basically just a stylistic preference. I'll just say, there's the parentheses. Okay, that covers that they're all odd. Now, we have to say none of them are prime. So I represents 9 is prime, which means we have to say I is not prime. So in some sense, it's going to be like up here. Neither means not the first and not the second. None means not the first and not the second and not the third. So once more, there's going to be 2 ways you could do this. You could say not the first and not the second and not the third, and then once more, stylistic preference. And then we have to put these together somehow. Well, it's saying both are true, and whenever we say both, we need a big and there. And so, bracket, bracket. Way too close to the edge there. So, this got a little complex, and so we definitely want to double check and reread it in our logic speak to make sure it's saying the equivalent to what is written in 12. So this says it is the case that 9 is odd, and it is the case that 21 is odd, and 45 is odd, and it is the case that 9 is not prime, and it is the case that 21 is not prime, and it is not the case that 45 is prime. Ugly, cumbersome way to say it, but we can see that that says the same thing. So that's how we do that. And again, how did I figure out this and here? I took the two parts of the sentence and realized it's asserting both. And remember, the word both should translate into, roughly speaking, A and B in parentheses. That says both. And then lowercase a here stands for all this junk. Lowercase b here stands for all this junk. And it's asserting both. However, remember, just like up here, if we want to write, we can, just as we write neither is negating a disjunction, we could also write none as negating two disjunctions here, so it would be the same on this side. By the way, stylistically, avoid V's, but also avoid T's and F's. That's going to get annoying when we start assigning true and false to these things. So I would go not one or the other. So this would also be fine for saying none, but this is more common. So either of those is fine. Again, I'm happy to talk about any of these more extensively if you want in the Ask Your Instructor or in the recitations. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and do just a couple of translations from 1.4 that introduce the material and biconditionals. So these are on page 34. If once more, I'm going to start with one that's in the back of the book. So we'll start with number 4. If time is not finite and not circular, then time has neither a beginning nor an end. It's pretty straightforward, but they tell us to use F, C, B, and E. You should, once again, articulate what each of those are. F would be time is finite. Two things. First of all, remember it's got to be a statement, so don't just say finite. Time is finite. Second of all, we're dropping the not, because not would mean it's a complex rather than atomic statement. So, C would then be time is circular. B would be time, for the same reason we set out the not, time has a beginning, and then E would be time has an end. So, that's what we're looking at. Notice the whole statement starts with if. So we're going to have a big horseshoe in the middle here. If what? If two things, then two other things. So if F and C connected some way, then B and E connected some way. So if time is not finite and not circular, then time has neither a beginning nor an end. So once more, we're at neither. We could say not one and not the other, or we can say neither. I'm just going to do it that way to mix things up a little. So as my autofocus works. So notice we have to stop here because this is not well formed. Because I could put parentheses here or here. So if I put parentheses here, it says if two things, then this. If I put parentheses here, it says not F is true no matter what, and if not C, then neither B nor E. Clearly, we want the former. We want to say if both, then this. So there you go with number 4. Let's do number 13, which is a little tricky. If you want it, you can have it, but you shouldn't blame me if you get in trouble. So once more, W, you want it. H, you can have it. B, you should blame me. Again, we drop the not because we're going to have to symbolize that. If, and then T, you get in trouble. So, let's do the easy part first. This is number 13. If you want it, then you can have it. But you shouldn't blame me if you get in trouble. Remember what I told you about ifs in the middle of the sentence. So first of all, you should have a cheat sheet to remember these kind of things. But more importantly, we can test it. So if you're not sure which way it goes, switch with an if then you're really comfortable with. If you're in Ohio, you're in the U.S. So what if I said, sorry, I lost my place. You shouldn't blame me if you get in trouble. So the if is in the middle. You're in Ohio if you're in the U.S. Well, no, that's not right. By switching it to my comfy case, I see that putting if in the middle switches the order. And so that tells me I need to change the order and go from if you get into trouble, then you should not blame me. There you go. So there's number 13. Last step, I usually like to check these. It is the case that if you want it, then you can have it. And it is the case that if you get into trouble, then you should not blame me. Or you could read this as implies as well. So notice when I switch back from symbols to English, it doesn't sound the same, but it does capture the same intended meaning, which is great. So we call it a day. So those are some practice ones. I want you to practice on your own, and I want you to help each other, but do remember that for more translation ones you're having trouble with, remember your resources, ask your instructor, and the recitations, but also remember if you're really having a lot of trouble, there's office hours appointments too. Office hours appointments are perfectly fine. So we will go from there.